I've got an ABC test run on tap today. Keen Roam, Keen Seek, and Topo Vista. I'm going all natural. I got the Topo Vista quite a while ago, did a first run, first impressions video on that one. Shortly after that, I received the Keen Seek. I did take that one with me on my trip over to Germany. Quite a bit of casual miles, trail miles, easy miles in that shoe, probably the most out of the three I'm running in here today. The Roam has been the most recent addition to my test quiver, so probably the least amount of test miles in this one, but the freshest in my mind. See, I'm starting out with the Seek and the Roam, one on each foot here, and the reason behind that is I found it hard to really decipher the difference between the two shoes right after receiving the Roam. To help me with this comparison here, I've been testing a lot of different insoles. Check out my Mount to Coast custom German insole video. I had these shoes in Germany and I got those insoles in Germany, so this was one of the first shoes that I tried those custom insoles in, and they're a leather insole, firmer. There's no foam, no cushion in those insoles at all. I am still trying to figure out whether those insoles are really a good option for running, but they got along decently well with the Keen Seek. But over the course of my various rounds of insole swapping and tinkering, once I put the stock Ortholite insoles back into both the Seek and the Roam, right away I noticed a very big difference between those very soft open cell Ortholite insoles and those custom ones that I have. So much so that it was even harder to kind of discern the difference between these midsoles. They're very similar in specs and composition, which I'll talk about, but to really get a better handle on the feel, I've swapped in some Scott insoles that I had, which I kind of like. The texture on the top fabric is really nice, gives me a little bit of a more grab on under the foot onto the shoe. I feel like that always helps, and it is a thinner, super foamy type foam, not a strict EVA, thinner than the Ortholite ones, so I get more feel of the midsoles coming through that insole. We've got Keen's Quantum Foam in both of these shoes here. We've got regular Quantum Foam in the Roam and Quantum Foam X in the Seek. The Seek does denote 25% PIBA blend along with the EVA, so I guess that's what the X stands for. With the Roam you have, I believe, just straight EVA. Both models are spec'd at 39.33 for a 6mm drop. I did measure them today just before this run, and both of them came in at 34mm at the heel. I haven't put enough miles into both of these shoes, either of these models, to expect them to have packed down a full 5mm. So perhaps their specs are running a little bit high, not quite the max cushion type of midsole or stack height that you would expect given the 39mm spec there. The weight of the Roam comes in at 10.9 ounces, while the Seek comes in at 11.0 ounces. So pretty much exactly the same there. 25% PIBA in the Seek model here, PIBA EVA blend. And with the Roam, I'm assuming you have a full EVA blend. Their website and specs, tech sheets do not indicate anything different. There is a little bit of difference in the outsole though. You've got a full 4mm lug depth with the Seek here, and they're a little bit more widely spaced. The Roam has 3mm, 1mm less here, and they're a little bit more densely spaced. I feel like it's more designed for smoother trails, even a little bit of road. You know, these are not super deep mud cleats or lugs on this one here, but it does tend to have a more cleaty feel on the ground, especially when you get to harder surfaces. This one, with those 3mm lugs, more densely spaced, feels smoother on the ground when you're rolling, especially even on the road or just harder surfaces in general. You don't have that sense of variation or texture under the foot, and that would be kind of those lugs somewhat pushing up, or it's just a very slight difference. Nothing to be overly concerned about, but it is one slight difference between these two models, the feel of the lugs underfoot. So I'm gonna go wind my way up around that hill over there. I think I did this route in a previous video quite a good sized climb back over there, so we'll see how they handle the ups and downs for sure. Bit of a steep climb here, probably gonna hold most of my thoughts for the way back down, but both of these shoes are feeling really great on foot, really great climbing. A lot of flexibility underfoot. They're very soft, no stiffness whatsoever, and the wide natural toe box just feels great grabbing the ground going uphill. Even though they are spec'd the same in terms of stack height, the Roam feels like there is more foam under the forefoot for sure. I'm not sure if it's just the straight EVA itself not feeling as soft as the Quantum Foam X Peebo blend in the Seek, or it could also perhaps be that outsole difference, maybe that wider space lugs in the Seek, just, I don't know, letting the forefoot kind of spread out more, even the midsole foam a little bit thinner, a little bit more ground feel. It's really close, but I would say also still noticeable. The Roam feels more cushioned under the forefoot, more protective. Seek, more ground feel. Reminder, I do have those Scott insoles here. They are thinner than the Ortholite ones, and I think switching those in is really helping me discern the difference here. Those Ortholite insoles, especially, they're probably like 5 mil thick. They can really blunt the feel and have it be hard to tell what exactly is going on with the midsole, because that Ortholite just squishes so easily directly under your foot. By the time you get into the rebound of the midsole, the feel is dulled out. Foothold is great in both shoes. I would say equally as good when I'm wearing them kind of casually, and maybe on some of the previous test runs, I did feel like the Roam perhaps was a hair more relaxed in terms of its fit. Felt like it had a little more volume over the top in the toe box. Really not much though. I'm wearing my Injinji mid-weight wool sock here. This is actually marketed as a hiking / backpacking sock, but it's plenty good for running. Nice and thick. I have US 9.5 in both of these models, so definitely true to size, natural toe box here. As far as both of these shoes being 10.9 ounces and 11 ounces, they definitely run lighter than their weight, and perhaps that's just me having a preference of flexible shoes, and also the foot-shaped toe box here, especially climbing up that hill there, now coming down the descent. The softness is there coming downhill, and I talked about earlier, just that roomy toe box. It feels great climbing. Love the feel of that underfoot. It's protective enough when I'm climbing on those gravelly, somewhat rocky parts. There's no plate in either shoe. Again, I feel like the Roam is just a little bit more protective. Again, it could be that outsole that's really catching more of the rocks and not allowing more of them to push up through, and also not allowing the midsole to contour as much as you are kind of stepping on those uneven rocks and stuff underfoot. As far as the feel of the midsole, is it really that much different with the 25% there in the Keen Seek? I think the factors that I talked about earlier are probably more important. The differences in the outsole, just the fact that it feels a bit higher under the forefoot, and it feels a little bit more flexy, higher under the forefoot with the Roam, more flexy, a little bit more ground feel with the Seek. I think those are the most important parts. I don't necessarily feel like the Seek midsole is just that much more energetic or bouncy or whatever you want to call it than the Roam. There's just really not that much to put between the two of them in terms of the foam itself or what you could actually feel on the run. Ran a bit of a loop here, so I'm gonna head back on this hard-packed dirt road here, see if I could talk about any differences in feel on the way back to the van. I'd say it is a little bit strange because I know for a fact that I measured both of these 34 at the heel before I left the house today, but the Roam just it seems to be a touch higher. It has the feel of being a touch higher, even a little bit in the heel, even knowing that I measured them the same. Maybe that is the foam itself. Maybe the PIBA is softer, and perhaps I'm kind of sinking in maybe a millimeter or two on each ground strike with the Seek, and the Rome's perhaps firmer EVA is just holding up the foot a touch more, but it doesn't feel firmer, that's for sure. I am gonna swap in the Topo Vista once I get back, so it's perhaps a good time to talk about arch contouring. It's there in both of these models, but I don't think to the extent that the Topo is gonna have. I was walking around in that shoe the past couple days, and I was kind of like, I really noticed how the contour was kind of high up under the arch. This one feels more slight, I would say. We'll see when I put the Vista on one of my foot in comparison. Still have to decide which shoe though. But the contour in both of these models from Keen here, it's there, but it's not as noticeable as some other shoes. It kind of smooths out, more gradually, I would say, from under the medial side, under the inside of the arch. It's more of a kind of gradual slope from there. So it's not as obtrusive for those of you that find that maybe annoying, maybe uncomfortable. Got this Nitecore Carbon Battery 6K, 6,000 milliamp hours here. This is actually part of a headlamp kit that I am testing for Nitecore. Obviously, it is daytime, so I'm not testing the headlamp right now, but this is a 6K battery here, so it's pretty awesome. I'm gonna plug this guy in to charge up my camera as I run back to the van before I do my shoe change. This one attaches, it's a separate kit, so I've got a Nitecore light to test in the front, and this one goes on the rear of the headband, and there's an attachment, a longer wire than this. This one didn't come with the battery, but this is something you could do, if you want to have some lightweight charging on the run here. I should probably turn that on there. If you want to have some lightweight charging on the run for a headlamp, oh, actually it is charging. There you go. On my way back there, and I just plug this in on the way. Super cool if you need to keep your watch charged or any other types of electronics. 6,000 milliamp hours. You can see how small this thing is. Great to have. Okay, so to my mind, given that the Vista is the beefiest shoe of the three here, it's certainly the heaviest. Talk about specs when I get out on the run. I'm going to run AB with the Rome. So I'm going to take off the Seek here, and then I'll put the Vista on my right foot. Might be able to tell I am doing some lace locking here with the Topo Vista, which I don't do with the Seek or the Rome. Just feel like this is kind of it's more of a wide open heel, I think. I don't know how to explain it there. Just feels like the collar is low, which I like, but perhaps maybe it could be a little bit more something around the top of the heel. I just feel like I want a little bit more heel hold in the shoe. Also, of a quick note here, I did punch an additional eyelet hole here. This middle one is an extra one. I find that the second eyelet hole, if you want to use runner's knot, it's just really far back. If you look at this, the first one is over here, which I feel like I don't get enough. I feel like there's just too much heel back here behind that first eyelet. But then the second eyelet, there's like a huge gap, so really far back. So I punched a second eyelet more forward, and that's the one I use my lace locking for. One thing with that is when I was using the rear eyelet for the lace locking, it was bringing this upper cross row here almost above the tongue. This is kind of a short tongue. You can see here, even with my customized eyelet here, I am just at the very edge of this tongue. It's surprising from Topo, because Topo's usually pretty good with their tongues. This is more of like a Hoka design where they kind of angled it down here, and it's very short. I would say that's too short. With my additional eyelet hole, it brings it down just a touch. You could imagine if I was lace locking with this one, it would be above, and it was right on there. So that was quite uncomfortable. So Topo, unfortunately, went with a short tongue in the Vista model here. To be fair, for this comparison, I'm actually going to take out that Scott insole from the Roam here. I had them in both of these shoes. Again, I was talking about comparing the midsole foams between these two, but comparing across brands against the Topo, I am going to put in the stock Roam insole here. So I want to be fair here in my AB Keen Topo comparison here. I mean, look at the difference in the tongue height here. This is so much more comfortable, even with the Seek model here. Different kind of setup, but plenty of space here. Very surprising from Topo. Alright, we got the Vista and the Roam on. Before I head out, we'll take a quick look at the Roam and the Seek models here. Flexibility check here with the Roam compared to the Seek. The Seek is definitely more flexible, and that is probably the difference. I talked about it not being noticeable in terms of the energy rebound from the foam, but it is definitely noticeable in terms of flexibility. I talked about having more ground feel under this shoe, perhaps due to the more spaced out lugs. You could see a little bit more ability to contour with the Seek here compared to the Roam. It's definitely a little bit, it's noticeably stiffer here, and it could be just the outsole itself, but it seems to be based on me flexing the shoe. This is certainly, it's not a stiff shoe by any means, but compared to the Seek model here, this one is certainly more flexible underfoot. As I was going up that climb there, this one felt super nice, you know, just a lot of ground feel. Those rocks, it climbs so easily, and it just, like, with the wide toe box, just wrapped my foot like a glove. Really felt awesome. This one fit the same, but with that lesser flexibility, it feels stable underfoot. It doesn't feel bad at all. I really like the feel. I mean, climbing up there with one shoe on each foot, both of them really felt great. Let's take a quick look at the upper. Got this booty style upper in the Seek. In my video, I talked about how it's quite loose around the ankle. It's not a tight wrapping upper, so I think this is something that could be improved on in future models. They do give you the gator Velcro here, and both of these models have the Velcro and the little tiny loop in the front. You may have to widen that out depending on what type of gator you have there, the attachment point in the front at least. But you have a booty type design here. There's no tongue here, so this wraps all around the foot, and perhaps that enhances the feel of, say, the flexibility in general of the shoe, with it being a booty style upper and just kind of enveloping and wrapping around the foot, compared to, say, just a traditional model here with the tongue here. So you don't have that ankle collar over here. Very traditional around here, just a normal gusseted tongue here, but the tongue gusset, it does extend all the way to the bottom. So you have a two-layer design here. You have the outer mesh, the tongue is gusseted, and that gusset extends to a wrap throughout the toe box here. So it's not just strips of gusset along the sides. This one is a little bit different, being that this is a wrapped knit ankle collar here. In the front of this toe box here, this is just the mesh itself. It's a little bit thicker than this model. This is more of an engineered kind of, has some airy kind of ventilation holes in here, because you do have that liner on the interior of the toe box in the Roam model. Seek model, a little bit different setup. You have the knit area in the upper here, and the tongue gussets go down about through here, and then the front of the toe box is just the mesh itself. So slightly different designs on the upper. Both shoes are really great. I think this is 165 and I think this one is 185. Honestly, I don't know. I like the Seek is an awesome shoe. This is also a really awesome shoe. I would say if you want slightly bit more protection underfoot, and maybe you're not crazy about more of a flexible ride. I mean, this is not like insanely flexible, but it is noticeably more flexible than this. If you know you kind of do better with a more kind of structured feel underfoot, you have like more of a solid landing and the midfoot to the rear, and similar level of you know, with the natural toe box ground feel and space up front, this is a great model. So I'd say, you know, choosing between the two may come down to that, whether you want a touch more ground feel, a little bit more flex versus slightly stiffer feel, probably a little bit more support, and maybe a touch more of protection, the feel of a touch more stack under the forefoot, even though my measurements and the spec measurements do not say so. That is just the feel that I get on the run. So let me get going in this one and the Vista, and then perhaps you'll have to choose between three. So Vista versus Roam here. I think I made the correct choice between the Keen shoes, going with the Roam here. I say that because having both shoes on foot now, the Vista just feels like a beefier shoe. And being that the Roam felt a touch more underfoot than the Seek, I would say that puts the Roam closer to the Vista here, even though, like I said, the Vista, just first impressions on foot, it feels wider, feels beefier. It's got that Vibram Mega Grip outsole. Just feels like, especially under the middle of the foot, the forefoot, feels like a bigger, more beefier is the word, platform on the ground. 38-33 is the spec stack on the Topo Vista 5mm drop. Interestingly, like the Keen models, I measured a bit lower. I measured 35 at the heel, so for me that puts it at 35-30 by my measurements. With both Keen models measured at 34 at the heel, let's put them at 34-28. Slightly higher spec 6mm drop with the Keen, so within 1mm, 5mm with the Topo. It's pretty negligible, I would say. No real noticeable difference between the three shoes in terms of drop. Weight is a little bit of a difference though. I've got 11.8 ounces in the Vista here, but I do have a US 10. My Roam in the US 9.5 is 11 ounces, and the Seek at 9.5 is 10.9 ounces. My Vista here in a US 10, sizing wise, does feel a little bit larger. I do kind of fall in between sizes often in Topo. I'm always like, sometimes a 9.5 feels perfect. Sometimes I feel like I could get a little bit of touching of the tips of the toes at certain times in the front of the toe box with a 9.5. I'm always kind of torn between sizing up to a 10 in Topo models. The Vista is actually one of the Topo models that I could probably go with a 9.5 in. But compared to the Keen models, I'd say these are pretty spacious. Both of them from Keen. I would say a Topo 9.75, if there was such a size, would be comparable to the Keen 9.5s that I have. But generally speaking, I would recommend going true to size with all three of these models here. But even with the half size difference between the models here, I still think the Topo is a heavier shoe. 0.8 is a big difference. It wouldn't be that much for a half size difference. Probably gonna come down to probably more robust, thicker, durable materials with the Topo. Not that the Keen is not durable, just feels like the Topo uppers a little bit thicker. Again, you have Vibram Mega Grip, that's gonna be a little heavier. And also the Topo beaded TPU FKT insole, that's gonna add a touch of weight. Quick stop to check fit and sizing here. You have a natural toe box with the Roam. Similar, it's exactly the same as the Seek in terms of shape, forefoot space, roundness at the front. Topo, you definitely have a little bit more. Again, a half size up here, but I think a 9.5 would still be the same. It'd just be maybe a touch, shorter, of course. There's a difference around this level here. So if you have maybe a foot that's more squared off, I would say, at the front, or you need this at the front of your smaller toes, the Topo is definitely going to be better. There's plenty of space in the Roam and the Seek. It just rounds out a little bit more. It's wide here. It stays, it's not like traditional tapered toe box here. It does stay quite round, but the Topo is, especially this Vista model here, it's just really squared off at the front. Perhaps you could tell just by looking at them, I felt like this was such a wider platform on the ground. Got the Vibram Mega Grip here. They did a good job with segmentation here in this Vista model. I like the new setup here. Gives a good amount of flex underfoot, especially in the middle of the shoe. This shoe is, I think, despite feeling beefier, as I said, on the ground, it is a more flexible shoe. I remember flexing it in my Topo video there. I'll do that when I get back to the car. It's definitely flexible. They give you that kind of gap around here, and you could really twist this shoe despite the pretty high stack here. Less flexibility in the Roam here. You could kind of see it flexes around the ball of the foot, whereas this is really kind of adaptable in all directions, and it goes along with, you know, having this split here in the outsole in the forefoot, and then this split in the rear here. It really lets the shoe kind of twist and turn and adapt on the ground. You see the ground's a little bit soft. I'm putting a little imprint there. This one, not so much. Maybe the Seek a little bit more flexibility, giving that contouring twisting. Again, it feels just a little bit more directed under the mid rear of the foot, and that may be something that you want in a shoe. So it's great. The toe box fit is, of course, excellent across the forefoot. Plenty of space. Mid-weight Injinji sock here. Of course, if I were to go to 9.5 here, I could probably even still wear a mid-weight sock, or if anything, go with a lighter weight sock here. Keen has done a really good job of matching the Topo in terms of midfoot hold. Topo is awesome at midfoot hold there. You can see the difference in the tongues though. Plenty of space here, nothing to worry about, and I am doing the lace locking here. I just feel like this is a wide area from the front eyelet to the back of the heel. It just seems like a lot of space there, and even with the flexibility, my heel wasn't pulling out of the shoe. It just felt like it was kind of like moving up and down a little bit in there. This is not a high tension lace lock here. I talked about how I had to move it up to avoid this short tongue here, but it does feel fine though. It's perhaps better having it further up than having the laces be further back if they had a better tongue or a higher, more cushioned tongue here. I like this. It feels pretty wide open. The shoe feels low on my foot, low around the ankle bone, and that's really nice for a big shoe like this, to have it not feel like it's having to be so high up riding on me. You can see the space. My ankle bone's up here. A lot of shoes, the On shoes in my Cloud Ultra review, they're kind of, this thing is riding on my ankle bone. They're really high. So there's quite a noticeable difference here with how low this shoe is at the collar. This one, similar, it's probably similarly low here. Neither shoe do I notice, in both shoes, I do not notice, let's put it that way, the collar on either the inside or the outside touching either my inside or outside ankle bones there. Just very comfortable shoes. So purely based on my measurements and based on feel climbing up this hill here, the Vista is definitely the most underfoot. Based on my measurements, 35-30, and the other two being 34-28. I would rank the shoes in order of protection, stack, underfoot, from least to highest. It would be Seek, then Roam, then Vista. It's not necessarily a very drastic difference, like say comparing a high cushion or max stack shoe to say a lightweight race shoe, and even the specs and everything, lug depth, very similar between all three models, but the feel on the run, how everything comes together, that's definitely the hierarchy. Traction wise between the two on my feet here, definitely give the edge to the Vista. I've got no problems with this level of rocks and this level of grade with the Roam, or even the Seek for that matter. I just kind of can feel the thicker, chunkier lugs of the Vista under my right foot. Just feels like I'm getting a little bit more grab there. Very slight, but probably a difference. The Roam, of course, has shorter 3mm lugs, closer space, so you are naturally going to have less traction. I can notice the difference in the width between the models here. Again, half size up, and the Topo definitely feels wider with this steady grade here. Pressure at the forefoot. Probably should be having a bit thinner sock than this mid-weight wool model with my Seek here in the smaller 9.5. Got all that. Topo does feel more comfortable in the forefoot heading up this long steady climb here. Perhaps that's just a vote for having enough space in your shoes, maybe sizing up, perhaps, especially if you're running longer distances. That is where I came through down here. You could probably not make out the road, but up through that gulch here, and then there's that little zig there, and I came up around this hill, coming up around over here. There's another trail that winds around that way, which is also pretty cool. Maybe the next A/B test. So now that I have the Ortholite insole back in the Keen Roam, it's definitely adding a level of softness, even if you want to call it protection, I would say. I mean, without the Ortholite, you get more ground feel. So in a sense, you could say it's a little bit more protective. I feel like I'm getting less better foothold and less better, not as good foothold and security with the Ortholite insole. Maybe I seem to be like squishing into it, and then I think that's letting my foot move a little bit more. And I think that's one of the problems I've had with, aside from water soaking up into them, a problem with Ortholite insoles that I have is that I get hot spots, and a lot of times by the tips of my toes or the balls of my feet, and I think that's just because the foot squishes in and then it just moves too much, and that friction, that rubbing, gives me some hot spots when I have Ortholite insoles. With those Scott insoles, there's less squish in the insole, so I felt like my foot was moving less in that shoe, even though the insole was taking up less space. When I initially kind of lace them up, probably I just dial in the fit right, and it doesn't change with the softness of the insole underfoot. That's just, something that I'm feeling right now on the run. You, of course, don't have that with the Vista beaded TPU FKT insole there. That is quite responsive. Love the feel of that underfoot. It doesn't have that soft squishiness of the Ortholite insole. It's definitely more responsive. Like the feel of that one too. The beads also give it a bit of texture underfoot, something I talked about liking with that Scott insole. I like to have a little texture on the top fabric of the insole. It just adds a bit more security, a bit more grab, less foot sliding. The weight of the Vista, 11.8 ounces. It is more noticeable underfoot, but you are getting something there. Definitely feels like the beefier, most cushy, most protective of the three models. So certainly for bigger runners, that would be of interest, or if you generally just want to have the most cushy feel, the most protective feel, easy on your feet for long durations and distances, Topo's just great for that, especially with the toe box, especially with these Injinji toe socks. You can see I'm also testing a new vest here, Nathan QuickStart 3 4-liter vest, Hyper Night version here. On the back there's a giant reflective pattern. This is a good one, I think, for those lightweight, even road runs where maybe you want to carry some extra headlamps, extra batteries. Maybe you're even city running on the road. You have that giant reflective panel on the back for safety and visibility. I'm taking enough today because I just want to have something lightweight to have my camera stuff with me. Not too much gear, being that I'm doing shorter loops, getting up and back from the car pretty quickly. Don't have to carry a lot. I like the zipper pocket here. It's a little bit of a different setup here. I'll be having a full review after more runs, but for now it's doing the job here. Lightweight vest. I'd like to have my microphone when I'm doing these reviews on the lapel. Just gives me better audio. Speaking of comfort, I have no issues at all with my ankles, Achilles, arch, anything with all three of these models. They felt great throughout the course of this run and all of my test runs. A lot of times if you just want to knock out those long training miles, you just don't want to have anything bother your feet, and these are just three great models for that. Going back to the arch contouring, the Vista, I would say it's closer now that I have the Ortho Light insole in the Rome. When I had those Scott ones in, I think there's less contouring. They're thinner, of course, you know, less contour built into those Scott insoles. So now that I have the Ortho Light here and the FKT insole in the Topo and the natural contouring built into both of these models here, it's a lot closer than I thought it was. I still think the Topo is going to be a touch higher along the inside edge, but the Topo also has a nice graduated drop off, which is actually a little bit different from previous Topo models. Not sure if I mentioned that in the original Vista review. Sometimes Topo has that noticeable bump in the arch. This one, I'd say it's there, but a little bit less than other Topo models that I've run in. Like the Keen models, there is no plate in the Topo model, but being that it is a little bit higher stack, it does feel more protective. I don't notice any of those rocks getting through. You feel kind of the contouring little maybe bumps and protrusions on the bottom of your foot, but really I think sharps and really pointy stuff get more or less absorbed. Let's check the flex on the Topo here. Yeah, there's a lot of flex here, and it's kind of even, I would say, throughout. For such a big stack, it starts, there's a good amount of flex here, again with that outsole missing there, and also at the front of the shoe. A lot of flex there. Compared to the Rome, a lot less around this middle area of the shoe. Probably equal at the front of the toe box here. Seek here, probably similar to the Topo, but still less flex around the middle of the shoe. But I think of the three models here, this one feels like it has the most ground feel. It feels the closest to the ground. Again, you know, even given the fact that it has the exact same specs as this one, I just have more feel with this one. I kind of have the most agility in the Seek model here. I guess the final wrap up here, final thoughts. If you're looking in the natural running shoe space, these are all great options. In terms of comfort, having that wide, spacious toe box, all three, they got it. They're gonna work for you if that's what you're looking for. I have a half size up in the Topo, so I do have more space in this one. I think with a 9.5, I'd probably be similar in fit and sizing to these models from Keen here, but at my true to size 9.5, plenty spacious. I wouldn't go up to a 10 in these models here. I think still, if I went down to a 9.5 in the Topo, I still think it'd be a little bit more space up here. Topo generally tends to be a little bit more square at that lateral front of the toe box here. So comfort, cruising, long miles, heavier weight here, but as I said, more protective. I mean, the flexibility climbing and going downhill, it's very similar. The ride is smooth, comfortable, and nice between all three shoes. You just get a little bit more protection with this one. I think the Vibram outsole helps with that, and there's just a touch higher stack with the Vista here. So you're gonna get more comfort, more protection. As I said, comfort, cruising, you want to lean towards this model. If you were going perhaps lighter trails and maybe this outsole is maybe a bit much for what you need, and certainly if you want to mix in some kind of primarily running on hard paths and even a bit of road, this shoe definitely feels like a bit much on the road. This outsole is too much, a little bit clunky, a little bit clatey on the road. If you were going to do your fair share of road to trail miles between these three shoes, I would definitely go with the Rome here because it's similar in feel to all three shoes, but the outsole just it's denser, smoother. It's going to work better on harder pack surfaces and even road. So road, this would be the pick. If you just want pure agility, you want more ground feel, and again, these two shoes are going to be similar in terms of traction. You can see how the lugs are. This is a little bit more spaced out here, but similar amount of depth here, and you know, there's good flexibility, good contouring in this Seek, similar to what you get with the Topo. The Topo is so soft, the zip foam is really good. This is one of their better zip foams, but you get a lot of that contouring in this one, and I would say that's most similar in that regard to this one. But this shoe is close to an ounce lighter. Again, I have different sizing, but I think even if they were at the same size, this would feel like a more agile feel. It has that booty upper, and it just more ground feel. It feels like this one's more connected, and I can kind of hop around a little bit more easier in that one. That's pretty much my wrap up. Comfort cruising, a little bit more agility, and kind of mix of road to trail somewhere in the middle with the Roam here. You've got 3 great options in the natural space here. Thank you for tuning in once again. I hope you like this ABC test. Let me know if there are other options that you would like to see matched up, not necessarily in the natural running space. These are great models. I think everybody could do well with a little bit more toe box space, and I think having the Keen, you know, a little bit more style in the marketplace, not as super wide as a lot of the Topo models. It kind of like looks like a normal shoe, so maybe that could work better for those of you that might not necessarily like the look of something like a Topo or an Ultra. Anyway, that's just another consideration there. But thank you for tuning in. Check out www.humblerunning.com. Lots of ABC testing right here today. More coming in the future. It all depends on your feedback and what you want to see. I like to be responsive and test and give you the content that you want to see. So I will see you out on the trails in the next one.